pan has spread globally by little steel bands being sprinkled all around, all over the world. This is from Poland. They're not too good. I got this from Alaska. Look at this. That's in Japan. Because this is really quite a remarkable one. This is the Royal Guard of Oman. These are, I suppose, army people in their robes and so on, their Muslim robes, playing the hammer. The guy with the mustache, the one on the left with the shaker, he's a Trinidadian, I think something in the oil industry, a guy called Matt Davies. Somehow we got Jordan there, and again, somehow the contact was made with Oman. That is how pan spread, by Trinidadians going places and setting up little steel bands. It's similar to how another aspect of the Trinidad culture spread. Recently, I read an article which gave the number of nearly 40 Trinidad-inspired carnivals in the US. This week, there's a New York Times article on the Trinidad Carnival. They didn't give that figure, but they said, they just referred to carnivals all over that have been inspired by the Trinidad Carnival. Just as they start little steel bands, it seems that Trinidadians, if they can't play pan, they start little carnivals. And people reach back into what is dear to their hearts, even if they didn't know it. So, for example, Claudia Jones at the time, she was a communist, an agitator in the US, and she was deported. Then she landed up in London, where she started the first black newspaper. And she was able, as a response to the race riots in London, to create a Caribbean carnival. Just like the first carnival in the US, which was in Harlem, they tried to copy the Trinidad Carnival and have it at the same time. The problem with that is that February cold, as they say, is K-N-A, cold no ass. So it had to be indoors, and there's something intrinsically wrong about Carnival indoors. So it's only when they moved it away from February in England into the bank holiday, which is in August, and in the US, they started in Harlem. Again, it started indoors by another Trinidadian called Jesse Waddle. And it just didn't work indoors. And they had it outdoors in Harlem. It seems that the American temperament cannot accommodate the bacchanal of open-air carnival. So after a few years, they shut down that Harlem Carnival. And it remained shut for a few years until it was reopened again by Miss Waddle and someone whose name I've forgotten. He died, I think, last year in Brooklyn. Now, again, that's the collective Trinidadian reaching into our Trinidadian soul and pulling up what is dear to us, what is important to us. It's also the Trinidadian eating our food, because very often Trinidadians go abroad, if they don't have, any qualifications or anything like that, they're trying to find any way they could make a living. And if they knew how to play an instrument, if they knew how to earn a living, they did it. And in many cases, it was pan. And the example that actually comes to mind is someone who is really a very distinguished member of the society. He was the chairman of, I think, not Petrotrin, NP, Lawford Dupre. Lawford went to Canada and he supported himself playing pan. There were others who made tremendous contributions to the culture, no less than Jeffrey Holder. Jeffrey went abroad, he went to Puerto Rico and then the US, and he took two of his members of the troupe and they carried their pans because they couldn't make a living as dancers, they couldn't make a living as a painter, but you could play in pan. And he got to perform in a play called The House of Flowers. The House of Flowers is actually set in Haiti. It's about a war between two brothers. And he was able to convince Truman Capote, who wrote the play, to include pan in it. So that was the first time pan was heard on Broadway by Jeffrey Holder. In a sense, Jeffrey Holder, who went on to become, really very, very big in the dance, and to get a Tony Award, I think, drew on another aspect of his carnival heritage. This is from The Wiz. He won the Tony Award for Best Costuming for this. Waving the rag, but also the chains, they could be jam molasses. I think if you look at the Trinidad Carnival and the travails of the Trinidad Carnival, what people went through for it to become what it is, it was to a large extent the African people celebrating their African culture, their drumming, their music, their dancing, their costuming, their satire. But it was also the French people fighting against the British, using their connection through the Creole language. And that gave Carnival its all-embracingness. And the Trinidad Carnival was not a sort of melting pot. It's just it allowed everybody their place. Lee Hyung was a Chinese band, just as hard as the white band. You had the black middle class band, you had the black working class band, you had the different groups, you had the Portuguese. The Chinese were very important early on. Patrick Jones invented Dragon Mask in 1905, which meant there was a place for the creativity, and it's very visual. I mean, I hate to admit this, Chinese people aren't too good with the rhythm, with the music. But visual arts, you cannot beat Chinese people. We created painting in Trinidad practically. And the idea of Carnival being a festival that embraces and allows people their differences, whether it's in Notting Hill, where you will have the dub and the reggae as well. This is most, I suppose, to me, clearly brought out in the case of the pan. If you go in any of the big bands, and we all know them, Desperados, Phase 2, or whatever. I mean, you will get someone from Japan. You'll get someone who is, 79 years old and was there when the band started. And you'll get a 9-year-old boy. The social barriers humans erect to keep out other humans, like to keep out Muslims, or to keep out blacks or whites, or females, or Catholics, or upper class, or highly educated, or uneducated. All of those are, in a very practical way, transcended within the steel band, because, as I say, in any of the big bands, you will get people who are 100% roots, and you will get people from the most upper class areas. You will get children, and that gap between adults and non-adults is one of the most difficult gaps. I mean, I'm always amazed at how someone could come from Tokyo and not speak a word of English and get into one of the top steel bands in Trinidad by just asking and being good enough. And that's the crucial thing, being good enough. And it goes back to what I said before, when I first began speaking, I began speaking about the sense of belonging, because that is, to me, one of the most precious and beautiful things about the steel band. So the final point I want to make, again, picks up from what I said earlier. One of the top padmen in Trinidad migrated to the US in 1967. That was Mr. Elin Manette. He was the captain, tuner, arranger, the sort of inspiration for Invaders. And he was one of the early pioneers. But the point is that Ellie and some others like him, including the many Trinidadians who went up with steel bands and jumped ship, went illegal, have managed to do what I said at the beginning, sprinkle steel bands all over, so that now, as Jared was saying, there are hundreds, and literally hundreds of steel bands in the US. There's this vast network of steel bands and carnivals that have some link to Trinidad. And I really think we would be foolish to not nurture it, develop it, because we think they will thief our thing. I suppose that is the door the Carnival Institute wants to open, and that is where perhaps the diaspora, now that it has gone out and has done whatever it has to do, it's time it comes home and pays dues to the parent.